I actually started out working with attachment and relational issues and, leftover childhood difficulties, and the trauma came later. But I think because Trauma in the Body was, the first book, that people think it's really a method for trauma. But they're very different, although they're really interrelated. So, with trauma, there's often dysregulation in the nervous system, where people get either hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, and there's all this work with animal defenses, like fight, flight, freeze, and feigned death response, that people develop habits of responses in those defenses that we have to work with and develop more flexibility among those defenses. And with attachment, it's really different, because our bodies start to literally shape themselves around our interactions with our attachment figures when we're very, very young, and we start to develop patterns of response. Like Bowlby wrote a lot about proximity-seeking actions, like signaling that you wanted somebody close, or actually approaching your attachment figure. And for kids who've had difficulties, even if it's not abuse or trauma, those difficulties can be pervasive in their lives, and they can have trouble in relationships when they get older. So we work a lot with just reaching out, and kids, adults and children, they'll reach out in different ways depending on their confidence that their attachment figure will respond to them in the way that they need. So, like, somebody might reach out like this and say, well, my attachment figures, they kind of expected me to be independent, so they don't have that full reach. And we look at how the beliefs, from the childhood live in the body. Like if someone grew up thinking they have to perform to be loved, their body might be mobilized, and if somebody grew up thinking that, or feeling that they didn't have quite the right kind of support, their body would have a different patterns. So we work with those leftover wounds from childhood, even when they're not experienced as life-threatening. And those trauma and attachment, they always overlap. So, everybody's had trauma, whether they're traumatized or not, and everybody has attachment issues. So we'll work with both. The way that I think of it, and a lot of the infant researchers write about this, is that those early patterns really show up in the movement of the body. They don't show up in an autobiographical verbal memory, but those patterns start very, very young. And you can see these procedural organization of action sequences even in infants, and they can constrain possibilities. Like if a child isn't picked up when needed in a consistent way, even if there's no trauma, the child's body will respond in a certain way that will constrain options, later on. But then, of course, all later experience contributes to those meanings and, that implicit sense of self as well.